Good day and welcome to Big Bad Tech. I'm your instructor Jim Pytel, and today we're going to briefly step away from electromechanical technology and discuss resumes, cover letters, and interviews, all necessary tools to acquiring a job. Because that's what a majority of you are here for, right? Unless you're a wealthy eccentric that likes dabbling in this stuff, most of us are here to obtain or expand a valued skill set so we can find a rewarding career and earn massive amounts of money in the service of capitalism. The goal of this lecture is to differentiate between resumes and cover letters, learn what to leave in and out of them, how to organize them, how not to wreck a job interview, and how to recover one if you do. Note that the recommendations as presented in this lecture are exactly that, recommendations only. Since fickle, mush-headed humans are often involved in employment decisions, there's a wide range of interpretation about this subject, and you might hear different or better advice. This being said, the techniques and layouts as presented in this lecture have helped a number of former graduates land excellent careers. If this works for you, use it. If it doesn't, don't. Because there's a lot of latitude about this subject, I'm going to try something new and actually encourage you to write your own opinions, recommendations, and personal experiences with resumes, cover letters, and interviews in the comments section below. Personally, interacting with other humans via chats and comments is a little weird for me, but I guess that's what people do nowadays, and I'd like this lecture to serve as kind of a tool to help each other out. Again, all of my advice is coming from my own personal experience and that of my students. There's a lot of other people out there that might know better than me. Let us know if you've got additional advice you're willing to share. And away we go. Let's start with a couple quick pieces of personal advice. Recommendation 1. Resumes are well-organized statements of measurable facts, whereas cover letters are warm, inviting conversations about your admirable personal characteristics with a dedicated purpose of driving the individual reading the cover letter into your resume. Resumes facts, cover letters feelings. Do not confuse the two. Cover letters courteously greet the individual reading it and repeatedly push, pull, poke, and drag them into the resume. Recommendation 2. Treat a job hunt as you would a hunt. Very rarely do hunters go into the woods and just start firing in random directions till they run out of ammo. A far more successful hunting strategy would be to learn about your desired prey, research its specific needs, and craft a special weapon to kill it. Long story short, find a specific job and craft a resume and cover letter for that specific job. If you're applying for a different job that places emphasis on different skills, make a different resume and cover letter for that different job. This does not mean you need to create a different resume from scratch for each and every individual job application, but rather that you should have a master resume from which you can pull specific skills to meet specific needs. Think of this master resume as Batman does the Batcave, which is this giant storehouse of bat boats, bat bots, bat bikes, and bat bombs. When Batman needs to beat the Joker's ass, he doesn't take all that bat shit with him, but he rather grabs what he needs and heads out the door. Using this technique, you should be able to quickly craft a carefully targeted resume from your growing arsenal of skills for specific jobs that place special emphasis on specific skills. For example, if a job application mentions hydraulics, you should be able to scour your master resume real quick and come back with all the skills that place special emphasis on hydraulics. Recommendation 3. Resumes are living documents that should be updated frequently. As you gain more skills as you progress through a program of study, take that skill and put it in the master resume for later use. Do this at a minimum annually, and if you haven't done it yet, do it now. Seriously, do it now. As we examine each section in detail later on, feel free to pause the lecture and build or update your resume as you go along. The employed among you are not exempt from this exercise. You might be happy with your job right now, but trust me, one day you won't. Take it from me. I'm happy with my job because I regularly threaten to quit. Capitalism cuts both ways, and if you have a well-documented, valuable skill set, you don't have to work a job you don't like, and other employers might be willing to pay you more for a job you like better. Have a resume at all times. I guess the Boy Scout motto sums it up best. Be prepared. All right, let's take a look at resumes first. Resumes are, again, well-organized statements of measurable facts, and all those well-organized statements of measurable fact need to fit on one page. Seriously, one page. You've got limited exposure time, and that resume needs to go off like a flash bang grenade in the reader's face with only the most vital contents burning their eyes and ringing in their ears. All the vital content in resumes should be formatted in the following sequence: contact information, objective, education, work experience, references. Keep in mind the target audience for this lecture series is fresh graduates of electromechanical or mechatronics programs and not experienced professionals. Experienced professionals might use an entirely different format, placing emphasis on different aspects of their professional background. Depending on your background, you may also wish to include one or more of the following sections between work experience and references, which can be arranged as you see fit: instrumentation and equipment, software, certifications and awards, military. Let's take a look at each section in detail. Contact information: name, CELI, email. Do not include your mailing address. No one is dropping by for tea. Name, CELI, email. That's it. Make sure your email is professional. chunkylover@hotmail.com. I'm looking at you. Objective: have a target. Don't shoot randomly. Reference a specific job number. Use items from within that job description to craft this statement. Briefly tell them why you're qualified for this position. For example, XYZ Wind Company is looking for a wind turbine technician in job 1234 that performs maintenance, repair, or replacement of parts to correct malfunctions, and troubleshoots complex mechanical, hydraulic, and electrical problems on wind turbines. And eligible applicants should have an associate's degree in a technical, electrical, or electronics field from an accredited college or university. Your objective should state, I am applying for job 1234 at XYZ to make the most of my mechanical, hydraulic, and electrical maintenance, repair, and troubleshooting skills I obtained at Columbia Gorge Community College Electro-Mechanical Technology program. Simple enough. Reference the specific job. Use elements from the job description to craft your objective. Briefly tell them why you're qualified for the job. Education. For fresh graduates, this is the most important section and the single reason an employer might be looking at your resume. For this reason, you should invest most of the time in crafting this section to your liking. I found the most effective way of doing this is simply listing not necessarily course titles, but rather course content. What would generally format education is the school or organization, the program of study, the dates of attendance and anticipated date of graduation, and course content. If you got a good GPA, put it in there. If you don't have a good GPA, don't put it in there. Then comes the laborious process of taking your degree apart and repackaging it for efficient display in a resume. For example, a graduate of the Columbia Gorge Community College Electro-Mechanical Technology program might package their educational experience like this. As of the time of this recording, the first year of the program consists of Electrical Circuit Analysis 1, Mechanics, Safety, Electrical Circuit Analysis 2, Hydraulics and Pneumatics, Industrial Computing, Electrical Circuit Analysis 3, Motor Control and Mechatronics. And the second year of the program looks like this: Semiconductor Devices and Circuits 1, Digital Logic 1, Power Generation and Transmission, Semiconductor Devices and Circuits 2, Digital Logic 2, Programmable Logic Controllers, Industrial Control, and all those hippie courses that you need to get an associate's degree, like history, psychology, sociology, and all the other ologies that seem to only produce more ologists. Since the titles of these technical courses may or may not mean anything to a potential employer, you need to take apart each of these classes and put on display the individual skills that comprise them. Consider Electrical Circuit Analysis 1. This is introductory DC electrical circuit analysis, in which students perform basic soldering and desoldering and learn to use an ohmmeter, DC voltmeter, DC ammeter, and amp clamp, as well as learn to use engineering prefixes, DC Ohm's law, DC power calculations, and build and troubleshoot series, parallel, and series parallel DC circuits, use DC electrical theorems, and importantly, interpret schematic diagrams. Do the same thing for mechanics: fasteners, hand and power tools, gears and gearboxes, lubrication, torque and tensioning, shaft alignment, cranes and rigging, and so on. Do this for each and every one of your technical courses and put them in your master resume. Now, I know this is time consuming, especially if this is the first time you've done it, and I'm not going to do it for you, but I can help you out. Open up all the playlists at the Big Bag Tech channel and scan the lecture titles from top to bottom. Open up your textbook and scan the chapters front to back. Open up your notebooks and scan the daily entries cover to cover. You have been taking notes, right? Ideally, this exercise will serve as a memory aid about some of the skills you've obtained thus far. You'd be surprised what you learned. Once you got your master list, you can now pick and choose from it to craft a specific job application. This is exhausting, but trust me, it's worth it. Once you've done it once, you don't have to do it again besides annual touch-ups. Again, resumes are living documents. As you progress through your academic career, you may wish to place less emphasis on certain skills and more on others. For example, if you're in the first quarter or the first year of a 2-year program, you need to grab at every tiny straw you can and stuff it in the resume to make it look full. However, if you're in the last quarter on the cusp of graduation with a lot of arms in the arsenal, rather than hauling every exhausting micro skill out of the closet, you might consider including a selection of only the most important topics, which still might be pretty exhaustive in retrospect. Now that you've done that for your primary technical degree, If you've got more than one relevant degree, they're customarily arranged from most recent on top and older as you go down. If the other degree you have is irrelevant to the application, you might want to consider not including it in the resume at all. Again, you got limited space and exposure time, and the space occupied by potentially irrelevant skill set might be better put to use to highlight skills relevant to the application. Speaking of irrelevance, do not include high school. No one cares about high school. True story. All right, work history. Similar to education, you would arrange most recent work experience on top and older as you go down. Each former occupation should be organized as follows: employer, location, job title, dates of employment, job responsibilities. This is another section that necessitates some time and effort in making each job explode off the page with highly valuable relevant skills. Some of you might be like, get real. How am I going to make my job cleaning dishes, mowing lawns, or slinging drinks to old drunks down at the bowling alley explode? Do not sell yourself short. The fact that you've had any job at all is relevant experience. Seriously, I talk to employers all the time, and the single thing they want the most is someone that can show up on time. If you can show up on time, communicate, work with other people, read a schematic, and use a DMM properly, you are hired. Seriously, at the time of this recording, employers are that desperate for technicians that even your lazy lab partner might land a job. Might. Going back to job responsibilities, if your employment history largely consists of non-technical occupations, this is your chance to emphasize those non-technical skills valued by all organizations and all occupations, namely safety, customer service, inventory management, communication, record keeping and documentation, scheduling, equipment use and maintenance, accounting, and the like. For example, let's say you worked in the kitchen at a restaurant. Depending upon your role in the kitchen, you might want to include phrases like managed an effective and productive kitchen environment to meet customer needs, developed and implemented recipes to maintain high standards of quality, maintained current and accurate inventory of food and supplies, ensured compliance with food safety regulations and standards. Notice each job responsibility is not a complete sentence, but rather a brief, factual statement about your ability to work in a professional environment, placing emphasis on safety, customer service, inventory management, etc., i.e. the things that all businesses do. This might take some thought on your part, but do not sell yourself short. Way back when, I spent my high school summers mowing lawns and whacking weeds at a golf course. It wasn't exactly the most glamorous job, but my resume made sure to emphasize that this job necessitated I regularly used and maintained hand and power tools, safely store and handle fertilizers, fuels, and other hazardous chemicals, and responsibly operate vehicles, all the while being responsive to customer needs. Now, don't feel like you need to put every job you've ever had in the work experience section, especially if you've got a history of hopping from job to job or getting fired. What you leave out of a resume is just as important as what you put in. This brings us to references. References available upon request. That's all you got to say. Don't waste space on this resume listing them out. This being said, have your references available. Have the most recent contact information and job title for everyone you plan on using as a reference printed on a sheet of paper and bring it with you to the interview. This is like a free extra sheet of paper for your one-page resume. Additionally, let your references know they're being used as a reference. Have the courtesy of reaching out to your present and former instructors, bosses, or coworkers and let them know you might receive a call from XYZ company about your pending application. This way, when XYZ calls, they're not caught on their heels and talk a good game about what a great student or employee you were. If you don't think a reference is going to give you a good referral, maybe because you're a bad student or a bad employee, maybe don't include them as a reference and find somebody else that can testify you've since cleaned up your act. I wouldn't recommend using friends and families as references, but rather individuals that can comment on direct professional experience. Ironically, one of the best references you can have is a former lab partner that's presently employed at the company you're applying at. Now, I know it's part of my act to regularly roast your lazy lab partner, but when it comes down to it, your classmates are truly the ones that know you best. Can you show up on time prepared? Can you be trusted to help out and not quit when it gets tough? They know. If there's one piece of long-term professional advice I can give you, let it be this. Make sure that you are not the lazy lab partner. Your classmates make great formal resources as you progress through your professional careers. Stay in touch with them. All right, that's the basic skeleton for most people. Contact information, objective, education, work experience, and references. It's up to you to put some flesh on these bones. Depending on your background, You may also wish to stuff the following sections in between work experience and references, notably instrumentation and equipment, software, certifications and awards, military. Instrumentation and equipment. Since technician work largely revolves around instrumentation, it might make sense to highlight the various equipment you are familiar with rather than burying it in the education section. Of interest to most industrial employers is basic DMM operation, notably ohm meter, voltmeter, and ammeter mode, oscilloscopes, function generators, amp clamps, and meg ohm meters. Mechanically, you should emphasize your familiarity with shaft alignment equipment, thermal imaging camera, and hydraulic torque wrenches. Depending upon the job of interest, you may or may not wish to mention specific brands and models of the equipment you have experience with. If you can use a special piece of equipment that not many people know how to use, like fiber optic test or installation equipment, or time domain reflectometer, make sure you state that. That single skill alone might get you the job. Software. The world runs on software, and as with instrumentation, it might make sense to highlight your software experience in a separate section rather than burying it in education. At a minimum, you need to know how to use the Windows operating system and popular Microsoft Office applications like Word, Excel, and PowerPoint, or their shoddy Google equivalents. Every business uses these types of programs, and you might be the most talented technician out there. But if you can't open or save a file or look something up on the internet without downloading a virus from a porn site, you're not going to get the job. A special word about Excel. This is a very powerful data analysis software tool, and you need to know how to enter and format data, use equations, and display and interpret information in a chart or graph in Excel. If your program of study does not make you take a class in Excel, take a class in Excel or teach yourself. Seriously. This section also gives you a chance to highlight your experience with industrial software packages used to program PLCs and motor drives. For example, you might have experience with the following small PLC programming software packages: TECO SG2 client programming software, Siemens Logo software, all capitals exclamation point, or Eaton EasySoft software. Or more robust industrial implementations of PLC programming software like Siemens Simatic Step 7, RS Logix 500, RS Logix 5000, Studio 5000, or whatever version Allen Bradley and Rockwell Automation is charging you a lot of money for the privilege of using. Throughout your educational experience, you might have also been exposed to circuit simulation software like Multisim or Automation Studio, computer programming languages like Python, C, or Java, and hardware definition languages like VHDL or Verilog, as well as field programmable gate array programming software like Xilinx Vivado or Intel Quartus Prime. Even if the employer in question doesn't make use of these specific software packages, the fact that you've had some experience at all demonstrates you're at least familiar with this type of software and theoretically can adapt to a different version with relative ease. Certifications and awards. If you possess unique certifications or awards, it makes sense to highlight these in a special section rather than burying them in educational work experience. Examples include, but are not limited to, OSHA 10, First Aid CPR AED, Forklift Certification, CDL or Commercial Driver's License, Network Plus, etc. Even if the certification in question is expired, it makes sense to draw attention that you once were certified to prove you're trainable. It may sound funny, but if you are an Eagle Scout, put this on your resume and you will get a job. Seriously, 1% of 1% of American youth get this award, and people recognize it. Military. If you're a civilian, go ahead and skip forward a couple minutes and I'll be right with you. Go on, I'll be right there. Don't worry. All right, now that we're all alone. Civilians, am I right? They're like cats. Ignorant, contemptuous, and at times hostile towards the armed services, yet at the same time, utterly dependent upon us. Don't get me started on those pathetic multicam marshmallow gun-humping LARPers. Anyways, civilians have no idea what we do, so you gotta explain what you did in terms their soft little smurf heads can understand. First off, no acronyms, no MOS, no NEC, no AFSC. You gotta spell out your military experience using words they understand and place it in a format they can read. Easiest way I've found to do this is to treat your military experience as if it was a work experience. A work experience that went on and on and on and on and on and followed you around all day every day and continues to do so even now. But I digress. Organization, duty station or places of deployment, dates of enlistment, job description, job responsibilities. As with work experience, you need to list your job responsibilities as if they were skills desired by technical employers. Notably, the ability to work with others, inventory management, communication, record keeping, documentation, scheduling equipment use, and maintenance, and the like. Very rarely will a civilian employer ask you to call for fire on troops in the open, But you should strive to package an experience like this as communication within a hierarchical organization following established procedures to accomplish a desired mission. Fire for effect. Again, this lecture's intended audience is the typical 20-something enrolled in electromechanical technology programs that most likely was an enlisted soldier, airman, sailor, marine, or coastie that served maybe a 4-year enlistment term, and not lifers or high-ranking officers, warrants, or NCOs. If you got a lot of military experience or perhaps served in a very specialized occupation, Navy divers, I'm looking at you might seek better guidance elsewhere. Regarding organization, it's probably a waste of space to drill down to platoon or squad level, but rather keep it at division, potentially diving all the way down to battalion level if you served in some multidisciplinary brigade combat team. Additionally, you might want to include notable awards or certifications like Airborne, Air Assault, Combat Lifesaver, or CIB. Additionally, it needs to be stated that if you're dishonorably discharged from the military, do not put this section on your resume. All right, civilians, I'm back. You guys did such a good job supporting the troops. Those bumper stickers with yellow ribbons really helped out. Anyways, this kind of brings us to the end of the resume section. It's time to discuss cover letters. Whereas resumes are concise statements and measurable facts, cover letters are a chance to put your admirable personal characteristics on display with the larger purpose of driving the person reading the cover letter into your resume. There's a lot of latitude when it comes to cover letters, but here's my recommendations. Cover letters need to be brief. Again, you got a minimal exposure time and it needs to blow up. Maybe 3 or 4 short paragraphs max. Last thing an employer wants to do is read some long, boring letter. The first paragraph should include a brief introduction, a restatement of the objective, and the mandatory phrase, "as you can see in my resume," or equivalent. This is important. The cover letter needs to treat the reader like a goat herder would an ill-disciplined goat, at all times poking, prodding, and driving them to put the damn cover letter down and look at the resume. Ideally, the reader is going to put the cover letter and resume side by side, and their eyeballs will ping-pong back and forth between them. In a perfect world, you'll be able to structure the cover letter such that it points the reader to education, brings him back, then points him to work experience, brings him back, then to instrumentation equipment, brings him back, and so on, such when they get to the last paragraph, which says, "If you wish to discuss my application for this position in person, I can be reached at Selly or email at your convenience." They will read the cover letter and resume in their entirety and send you an email. In between these gentle redirections, you should include statements about your admirable personal characteristics, highlighting your dependability, timeliness, attention to detail, and the like. You may wish to give examples about hands-on lab experiences during your program of study, and importantly, tell them you are good at something, especially enjoy doing a particular task, or have a deep understanding of a particular topic that maybe other people don't. Now, don't be cocky, and importantly, don't lie, but try to make yourself unique and desirable. I guess the same thing could be said for dating, which if you think about it, it kind of is. Resumes and cover letters put on display your admirable personal characteristics, employment history, and professional skills with the intention of attracting interest. Once you've got their attention, keep their attention by delivering more and more of what they want. All right, I don't know how you did it, but you did it. You got a call back and it's time for an interview. Hold on, let me back up. Remember that selling number and email you put in the contact information in your resume? Answer the phone and check your email. This way you know the moment you get the call and can respond appropriately. Also, if you're still enrolled in program of instruction, let your instructor know you're waiting on a call. With enough advance notice, most of the time your instructor can excuse you from a class if you need to set up or attend an interview. After all, that's what you're in school for, right? To get a job. Before we discuss interview preparation, let's discuss interview format. Chances are your interview will take one of 3 forms: a phone interview, a one-on-one face-to-face interview, or a face-to-face panel interview. Nowadays, I guess you could throw a Zoom interview in there too, which is a mix of phone and face-to-face with all the bad, none of the good, and a significant chance of connectivity issues. Phone interviews. Phone interviews are super hard because you can't read and respond to the interviewer's body language and interpersonal cues, nor can the interviewer read and respond to yours. Seriously, one of the hardest interviews I ever had was a phone interview with one question: "Tell me about yourself." And the interviewer went dead quiet. I essentially did a live spoken word performance of my cover letter and resume to a dead phone line, hoping I'd hit on something they were interested in or at the very least engage. After 15 minutes of essentially silence on the other line, I wrapped it up and the interview said, "All right, Thank you, and hung up. Turns out that was an initial screening call for a later second face-to-face interview with a panel. Hopefully not every phone interview you have will be as weird as that one, but really that's what a lot of phone interviews are. Initial screening calls to make sure you're really worthy of scheduling a second face-to-face interview. More often than not, this initial screening call will not be conducted by a site supervisor or direct manager, but rather some human resources drone, especially if you're dealing with a larger Borg-like superorganization. GE, I'm looking at you. Most likely the HR drone is going to ask some very general questions like, in what way are you qualified for this position? Are you willing and able to travel? What are you looking for in this position? What are your salary expectations? Why are you leaving your current employer? If you're a fresh grad, this should be an easy answer. If offered a position, how soon would you be able to start? And after you answer these questions to their satisfaction, they'll ask, do you have any questions? First question you should ask is, can I expect a call to arrange a face-to-face interview with a site supervisor? Ideally, your impetuousness will be rewarded with another call or email setting up a face-to-face or Zoom interview. Interviews might be conducted one-on-one or with a panel. Oftentimes, the one-on-one interview will be your direct supervisor if awarded the job, whereas a panel interview might also include this person's direct supervisor as well as potential coworkers. Additionally, a panel interview might include other non-technical staff like HR. Interviews will be conducted as you might expect. Introductions, questions to you, questions to them, and closing statements. This doesn't mean you can't subtly direct an interview where you want it to go. More on this in a moment after we discuss interview preparation. The first piece of advice I can give to you about face-to-face interviews, and for that matter, life, is this. Don't be weird. If there's one thing in common about former students that failed to obtain meaningful employment, is that they were all weird. They might have been 36th level elves with a charmed Longstaff in whatever computer game they played in their mom's basement all night, but in the real world they were weird and didn't interact well with other humans. Keep in mind, weirdness is not limited to the inability to differentiate fantasy from reality, but weirdness could also take the form of a volatile, argumentative nature, extreme political or religious views that you just won't shut up about, or a refusal to wear shoes in public places. Seriously. Every day I had to kick a student out of hydraulics lab and tell him to go home and get some shoes. Guess what happened next week? No shoes. Guess what happened when he graduated? No job. No one wants to be responsible for a weird employee or work with a weird coworker, even if that weirdo is a very talented electromechanical technician. That's the point of including potential coworkers on the panel interview. The first question the direct supervisor is going to ask your future coworkers after the interview wraps up is this. Do you want to work for this weirdo or not? When you get right down to it, an interview isn't so much of a quiz about your technical understanding, but rather a personality test. If you can approach the interview in this fashion and not stress out about it, chances are it'll go pretty good. Now keep in mind, this personality test goes both ways. If you walk into a panel interview and you don't get a good feel about the group's safety, behavior, and organization, you might consider working somewhere else. Related to this topic, a word to the ladies. Don't worry, you got this. Now, I'm not going to lie to you. The technical world is still disproportionately populated by men, and sometimes outdated modes of thought persist. But larger, more reputable employers are starting to realize that some young men are so wrapped up in their stupid video games they can't interact with real humans anymore. This is your opportunity. Take it. A word to the guys. Get off the couch, turn off the Xbox, go on a run and do some push-ups. You embarrass me. If this doesn't apply to you, disregard. What was I talking about? Oh yeah, interview preparation. Dress the part. I know some folks may recommend you wear a suit, but I don't because technicians don't wear suits. Technicians wear clean work pants, clean closed-toed shoes or safety boots, and clean work shirts. At a minimum, have a knife or multi-tool in your pocket. Seriously, I feel sorry for the toolless dweebs who walk around this earth incapable of opening a cardboard box, let alone fixing something. If you have a DMM, bring it with you and be prepared to show you know how to use it. Have extra copies of your resume, have your master resume, have your references, have a picture book. Some of you might be like, all right, why do you want me to bring all that stuff for? It's not like they're going to put me to work on the first day, are they? Here's the deal. I want you to bring all that stuff to the interview because I want them to ask you about it. This goes back to subtly directing the interview where you want it to go. If you walk in with a DMM in your hand, they're not going to ask you some lame question like, Tell me about your greatest strengths and weaknesses. They're going to ask you about the DMM. When you're done showing them DMM tricks, they're going to ask you what's in the picture album. Credit where credit is due. The picture album is not my idea, but rather one of my former students, Reynold. Reynold is a Pisces. He likes holding hands, long walks on the beach, and ladder logic. Reynold is a super badass technician and all-around good guy. He entered our program with a strong mechanical background, and over the summer he rebuilt a wreck into a super slick classic truck. During the rebuild, he took pictures of his work from beginning to end. When a panel interview asked him to give an example of a project he worked on, he opened up the picture album and said, "I think this will suffice," and spent the rest of the interview talking about what he wanted to talk about, which is restoring classic trucks. Needless to say, he was quickly hired and has done very well for himself as an electromechanical technician. Now, you might not be smooth, talented, or as handsome as Reynold, but you do have a cell phone in your pocket, right? And that phone has a camera on it. If you're enrolled in a reputable program of study, you should have at least 2 hands-on labs a week. Here's the deal. Take a picture of each of your labs and maybe print off a couple schematics and ladder logic diagrams for a couple of the motor control circuits you built. Assemble the pictures, schematics, and ladder logic diagrams in an album or a folder and be prepared to talk intelligently about them. Show the ladder logic diagram for and a picture of an assembled 2-wire circuit. Do the same for a 3-wire circuit. Compare and contrast 2 and 3-wire circuits. Talk about contactors and overloads. Show a picture of a PLC you commissioned. Compare and contrast hardwire relay-based ladder logic with the programmed instructions inside a PLC. The point is, make the interview about what you want to talk about. This does not mean you take absolute control of the interview, but rather you make the interviewers interested in what are coincidentally your favorite subjects. Interview preparation also means you have ready answers for common questions. Have an example of a project you worked on and be prepared to discuss a troubleshooting experience because they are undoubtedly going to ask about project management and troubleshooting. Keep in mind your example project doesn't necessarily need to be technical in nature, but could be any long-term undertaking that necessitated planning, coordination, and management. I was asked this question in an interview once and immediately started talking about some technical project. A couple sentences in, I saw some non-technical members of the panel start to tune out. And I said, wait, here's a better example you might all relate to. I demolished and renovated a kitchen from top to bottom, electrical, plumbing, flooring, cabinets, you named it. Everyone took notice because it was something they all related to and helped establish connection. Regarding troubleshooting, have both mechanical and electrical examples. If you're enrolled in a reputable program of study with hands-on lab experiences by now, you've had plenty of opportunities to screw things up and get them working again. Be prepared to talk about these experiences and the logic that led you one way or the other. Think back to the basic properties of series circuits. Current through elements in series is the same. If there is an open anywhere in that path, all current stops. This is something you learn in week 5 of DC circuit analysis? And hear me now. A broken or missed connection is the root cause for 99% of the problems you will ever encounter in the field. The remaining 1% being a mix of incorrect settings, software problems, or both. The actual resolution of the problem isn't what the interviewer is necessarily looking for, but rather the thought process that guided you to the solution. Fundamental series circuit properties demonstrate an open anywhere in a series path stops current flow. You should be able to relate basic electrical theory to some observed problem. For mixed electromechanical systems, of utmost importance is your ability to quickly recognize in which realm the problem lies. For example, consider an electrically controlled hydraulic system where pressure influences force, flow rate influences speed, and valve position influences direction. Hydraulics serves as the primary power doing the actual lifting and lowering, whereas electrical serves as pilot control, determining the sequence and direction. If a cylinder is extending, but extending with insufficient strength, the problem is not the electrical pilot system, and the problem lies entirely within the hydraulic realm. Perhaps the pressure relief valve is set too low. The problem is, don't troubleshoot something that's clearly not causing the problem. You should be able to talk intelligently about some of your lab troubleshooting experiences and how you resolve them. Again, very rarely are interviews technical quizzes, and most questions will be focused about your personality and professionalism. The fact that you are enrolled in a reputable program of study is often proof enough of your technical knowledge. This being said, expect a couple technical softballs to be lobbed your way. It is your responsibility to knock these easy pitches out of the park, especially if you're one of my students. I expect and will tolerate nothing but the best from you, so don't screw this up. Be ready though, because sometimes these easy technical questions have more complicated follow-ups that might trip you up if you're not prepared. Here's a couple examples of low-level technical questions with tricky follow-ups. These are real questions that some of my students were asked during interviews, so pay attention. What's the difference between grease and oil? Grease is a soft solid, oil is a liquid. Grease has a tendency to be used on slower moving mechanical linkages, whereas oil has a tendency to be used on faster moving mechanical linkages. Next question. Follow up. You're working with a coworker and neither of you know the proper lubricant to use for a particular application, and your coworker suggests that you just coat the part in a bunch of oil and move on. How do you respond? Stop work. Research the application and determine the proper type and amount of lubricant. Next question. See how the initial question went from technical to procedural? Expect this. Have a response for the technical and procedural aspects. You don't even need to know the procedure because it will often be written out. The fact is, you're willing to follow an established procedure each and every time and not go cowboy. The answer to every single question is follow the established procedure and work within the chain of command. Keep in mind, though, in the interview is largely a personality test. Try this sample interview question on for size. Question. You and a coworker are working at heights, and the coworker refuses to wear the protective harness and fall arrest system. What are you going to do? A. Follow their example and not use your PPE. B. Ignore your coworker and continue to use your PPE. C. Call your manager and let them know your coworker won't use their PPE. The answer is none of the above. Again, the interview is a personality test. Yes, you should elevate items of concern up the established chain of command, but you also need to work as a team. Part of being on a team is to politely tell your team members to get their head in the game. A good response to the safety question might be, I would politely ask my coworker to use their PPE. The interviewer might push back. Let's say the coworker still refuses to use their PPE. Now is the appropriate time to elevate this up the established chain of command and tell your boss about your coworker's refusal to wear their PPE. The interviewer might push back again. Let's say this person refusing to wear their PPE is your boss. What are you going to do now? The answer is, ask them to wear it, and if they don't wear it, go to their boss. You dig? Work as a team, follow established procedures, operate within the chain of command. No, I'm not going to go through all the possible interview questions that can and will be asked, but if you can remember these simple rules every time you craft a response for a question, you will ace that interview. Have a basic understanding of technology and be able to communicate technical terms to non-technical people. Follow established procedures, work within the chain of command, be a good team member. Another piece of advice I can give about interviews is this. Read the room and know what the job entails. True story. One of my former students was interviewing for a traveling retrofit position for a wind turbine service organization. A traveling retrofit team, as the name implies, travels from place to place, taking off an old part with frequent failure rates and reinstalling, i.e. retrofitting, a redesigned part that hopefully won't fail as frequently. Long story short, get to a site, do a job, go to a different site, do the same job. The interview was going pretty well, and it was just about to wrap up when the team lead asked my student, how do you feel about performing the same task repeatedly? And my student said, oh, that would drive me crazy. Interview over. Performing the same job over and over was the job. The point is, know what you're getting into and don't apply for jobs you don't like. I guess it worked out for this guy in the end, though, because they actually found him a different position he enjoyed and excelled at. All right, let's wrap up this section with a discussion on pay. Now I know you're a dependable person with some valuable technical skills, but I need to warn you that you'll most likely not land a high-paying gig straight out of school, and you probably should temper your expectations. The machinery of capitalism is indeed oiled with the blood of the workers, and there's always someone more desperate than you that'll do the same work cheaper. How desperate are you? You should have at least a general idea of compensation well in advance of the interview. Since cost of living varies wildly across the United States and due to inevitable financial fluctuations, any figure I present here for average technician wage is immediately suspect. Do your research for comparable positions in your area and keep in touch with former classmates. You got to start somewhere, but the place you start might not be where you want to stay forever. There's probably not a lot of room for negotiation for starting pay, but more opportunities will open up with more experience. Stay flexible. If money is indeed your primary concern right out of the gates, A number of former students have taken admittedly less glamorous, more demanding, yet highly lucrative travel jobs upon graduation. If you're young and you don't have a baby or a baby mama or a baby daddy you need to take care of, you need to snap jobs like this up. Build experience, save money, and with a year or two of experience, you'll be better positioned financially and professionally to make choices about your career. Speaking of money, save money. At a minimum, you need to be tithing 10% of your take-home pay to you and maxing out any employee-sponsored savings plans. And you have to be self-disciplined not to touch it. Eventually, you're going to want to purchase a house, and housing prices are only going up. As I mentioned earlier, a number of my students have taken high-paying travel jobs right out of school, and half of them follow my advice about saving money, half of them don't. They see their first paycheck go crazy and buy themselves a Camaro, a snowmobile, a jet ski, and a tricked-out AR-15. Far be it from me to tell you how to spend your money, perhaps a sensible pickup truck and a quality bolt-action 308, or a Mossberg 535 and Mossy Oak breakup Infinity with interchangeable field turkey and rifle barrels might be more efficient use of your pay. This being said, you got to get the job, and all this advice about saving money is pointless if you don't get the job. One of the most successful post-interview techniques I can recommend is this: send a thank you letter. Thank the interviewers for their time and use this extra opportunity to remind them about your interest in and qualification for the position, and potentially clarify any misstatements you made in the interview. Those graduates that send thank you letters have significantly more success in landing better jobs than those that don't. All right, we're just about to wrap this up, and some of you might be wondering why I haven't discussed online job boards or recommended a particular job search site. I'm hesitant to do so for the same reason I'm hesitant to specify an average technician wage. Most likely, any recommendation I give today will be immediately invalidated tomorrow. This being said, a lot of people seem to be having success with LinkedIn. One solid recommendation I will give you, however, is this: usajobs.gov. When you are done with this lecture and your resume, I need you to go to usajobs.gov and fill out a profile. Do it. It's a lot of work and takes a lot of time, but trust me, it's worth it. Entering a profile is simply putting elements of your resume in the correct boxes. If you got a good resume, all you got to do is put it in the right entries in the right spots. There are a number of rewarding technical careers in federal organizations like the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers and Bonneville Power Administration, and they're only available for people that have filled out their usajobs.gov profile. Additionally, with an active profile, this site also searches for positions which you are qualified for that might have escaped your notice. Lastly, I should mention that some large Borg-like superorganizations like GE and Siemens have a similar feature whereby you must enter your resume into their specific career database. All right, that's all I got for you today. Again, consider everything I discussed in this lecture as a recommendation to be used or discarded as you see fit. This being said, the resume and cover letter layouts and interview techniques and strategies as presented in this lecture have helped a number of former students land great jobs that have led to rewarding careers. Feel free to let other viewers know how it's going out there in the comment section below if you've got any additional job hunting advice you're willing to share. In conclusion, this lecture discussed resumes, cover letters, and interviews, necessary elements to obtaining a job. We discussed how to effectively organize a resume and how a cover letter should drive a reader into your resume. Additionally, we examined common interview scenarios and how to prepare in advance for the most predictable among them. Lastly, we discussed the importance of sending a thank you letter after the interview and briefly discussed job-specific profiles and databases. Remember to review these concepts as often as you need to really drive it home. Imagine how well lab will go if you know what you're doing. Thank you very much for your attention and interest, and we'll see you again during the next lecture of our series. Remember to tell your Lazy Lab partner about this resource, and be sure to check out the Big Bad Tech channel for additional resources and updates.